Have you ever looked at one of those grand parliament buildings and wondered what really goes on in there? There's so much more than just fancy debate clubs. They are, for all intents and purposes, the engine room of a democracy. And today, we're going to break down one of the most fundamental parts of any government, the legislature.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics. What even is a legislature? Then we'll look at how they're built. One house or two. We'll cover their core jobs, and then, this is the really interesting part, we'll dive into a case study, the Parliament of Bangladesh, to see what happens when the ideal meets the real world.
Okay, so first things first, what exactly is a legislature? And where does this very official-sounding word even come from?
Well, the clue is right there in the name. It actually comes from two Latin words, legis, which means law, and latio, which means proposing or bringing. So, a legislature is quite literally a place for bringing the law. It's where elected representatives come together to hammer out the rules we all live by.
And this whole idea has some seriously deep roots. The British Parliament, which was formed way back in the 13th century, is often called the Mother of Parliaments. Now, it started as just an advisory council to the king, but over time, it slowly evolved into the powerful lawmaking body we see today. And it basically created the blueprint for governments all over the globe.
And what's really cool is that while the core idea is pretty much universal, the names are incredibly diverse. In the US, you've got Congress. In the UK, it's Parliament. Israel has the Knesset. Iran has the Majlis. Different names, different cultures, but all built around that same fundamental idea, bringing the law.
Okay, so once a country decides to have a legislature, it runs into a massive design choice right away. Should it have one big room where everything happens, or two?
This leads to two main models. On one hand, you have a unicameral system. That's just one house, like you see in Bangladesh or Turkey. The big advantage here? Things move fast. Laws can get passed much more quickly. But on the other hand, you've got the bicameral system. Think of the USA, the UK, or India. They have two houses, usually a lower and an upper house. This whole setup is designed to be slower, more deliberate, a way to add extra checks and balances to the system.
So whether it's got one house or two, what is a legislature actually supposed to be doing all day? I mean, what's on the official job description?
Well, in theory, it really all boils down to four critical jobs. First, enacting legislation, that's the obvious one, making laws. Second, approving the national budget. They literally control the country's purse strings. Third, and this is a big one, representing the citizenry, being the voice of the people. And fourth, overseeing the executive branch, making sure the government is held accountable.
But let's pause on that third point, representing the people, because that is way more complicated than it sounds. When a representative gets up to vote, who exactly are they speaking for?
This is where it gets messy. Is their number one loyalty to their local district, or just the people in that district who voted for them? What about their political party? Or should they be thinking about the country as a whole, even if it goes against what their district wants? And hey, what about their own conscience? Every single vote is this massive juggling act between all these competing pressures.
To see how all these ideals and, let's be honest, all these tensions play out in the real world, let's zoom in on a specific example, the Jatiya Sangsad, which is the National Parliament of Bangladesh.
All right, so here's the quick rundown. It's a unicameral system, remember, so just one house. It has 350 seats in total. 300 of those are directly elected with a first-past-the-post system. Basically, whoever gets the most votes in a district wins. Simple as that. The other 50 seats are reserved for women, and they're handed out based on how well each party did. And this whole thing gets a reset with elections every 5 years.
So we've got the textbook definition of what a legislature should be, and we've got this structure of the Bangladesh parliament. Now we get to the really crucial part. What happens when that theory slams into the friction of real-world politics?
This brings us to a really stark number, 31 minutes. 31 minutes. What is that? Well, that is the average time it takes for the Parliament of Bangladesh to pass a law. And just to put that into perspective, take a look at neighboring India. The same process there takes an average of 141 minutes. That's more than 4 times as long. The speed in Bangladesh is absolutely staggering, and it forces you to ask a pretty critical question. Is this a sign of incredible efficiency, or is it a sign of something else entirely? Well, according to researchers, this speed actually points to several really deep-seated challenges. With members of parliament spending only about 12% of their time on actual lawmaking, the legislature runs a huge risk of just becoming a rubber stamp for the executive branch. This whole situation is often made worse by a culture of boycotts from the opposition and the simple fact that recent parliaments haven't really had a strong, effective opposition to begin with.
A key piece of this puzzle is found written directly into the country's constitution. Article 70, sometimes known as an anti-defection law, says that a member of parliament will lose their seat if they resign from their party or, and this is the absolute kicker, if they vote against their party in parliament.
The impact of this one rule is just enormous. It makes it nearly impossible for an MP to follow their own conscience or even to represent their constituents, if that means going against the party leadership. That fourth core function we talked about, overseeing the executive, is severely weakened when a tool like a no-confidence vote becomes basically unusable. Why? Because voting against your party means losing your job.
And this brings us right back to our central question. A legislature is designed to be the place where the will of the people gets translated into law. But if its own members can't vote freely, if it passes laws with hardly any debate, can it truly be the voice of the people? It's a question that gets right to the very heart of what a legislature is supposed to be.